And our objective is to see things as they are. If there are challenges coming, maybe it's a person, maybe it's a financial challenge, whatever it might be, but not worse than they are. Welcome to the Sales Made Simple podcast. This podcast is dedicated to helping overwhelmed outdoor living professionals, landscapers, and hardscapers just like you increase your closing rate to over 75% without doubling your workload so you can build a 7-figure business that doesn't need you. I'm your host, Joshua Gillow. Let's dig in. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the show. Your host here, Joshua Gillow. Today, we're going to talk about the top 3 things that contractors need to focus on right now, springtime, hammer time, when it's just craziness out. And I brought Frank Bourque back on the show. He does a lot of business consulting in the industry, and I really wanted to get his sense of what he's seeing his customers, his clients, what they're out there struggling with right now, what we need to focus on as an industry to not just survive the spring, but to thrive through it. So, Frank, welcome back.
Hey, thanks for having me, Joshua. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. I'm excited to have our conversation today. So I'd love to just dig right in. So what are the top 3 things you think contractors need to be focusing on right now that's going to help them thrive and not just survive the springtime?
Yeah, you're right. It almost feels like it's all at the same time. Oftentimes for landscapers, the springtime it's busy, and sometimes it's busy being busy. So we got to be careful that we don't let the busyness around us take control. And so the first thing that I usually, and I kind of put this into a framework to help my own clients is it's like the spring survival framework is what's the first thing that we all need to do when we get really busy? Make sure you're in control, right? So it's about planning the week. So the first 3 things I would look at is, do you know your top 3 priorities? I'll give you an example. I asked one of the business owners I work with on a weekly basis, and my question to him for that week was, okay, you're starting to be busy. What are your first 3 priorities for this week? And I kind of saw the look in his eyes that I see often from a lot of business owners is, I have more than 3 priorities, Frank. Like, how could I just bring it down to 3? And I said, well, think about for you, what do you need? Who's responsible for what in your business? What needs to get done this week? And when does it need to be done? By what time does it need to be done? And so that started that conversation around, well, okay, my priorities, I have a lot, but here are some examples, right? Do you need certain jobs finished by the end of the week? So what does that look like? What are those jobs? Do you need a certain amount of money collected by the end of the week, which helps the business run? And then what does your leads look like? Do you need to take care of that funnel that brings you those leads, that money, those sales? So those are all the first questions that I think a business owner needs to align with is, does my information match the information that I'm going to give to my team? And do my team have enough information to do their job really, really well? So those are once you've kind of identified some of the priorities, the 3 W's is really where I go. And the 3 W's is the who, what, and when. So every time you set a priority, who's going to own that? Who's responsible? You can delegate it, but you ultimately, you're still responsible for it. So who's going to be in charge of those results, of getting those results? Then, as I mentioned, what needs to get done, that needs to be well defined. So if that's the handoff process for the crews, the most organized and structured and profitable crews I know have a good handoff process. And I think the handoff process has a lot to do with my second tip. One of the biggest problems when it comes to sales and then passing it on to the field. But we need to get control off of that and just ask those questions as a starting point, in my opinion.
Absolutely. I mean, this is the core of accountability, right? It's making sure you know who's raising their hand or who's been delegated to do it, what they have to do. So clarity is extremely important. And then when is it due? If you say, by the end of the week, that's a pretty wiggly space. But if you say by Friday, 3:00, that puts some teeth on it. You're like, okay, wow, I really need to do this. So listeners, if you're helping your teams, get to the finish line, the clearer you can be with them, the more confident they can move forward toward that end goal. right? That's the real thing. So it's
Yeah.
not who, like you guys, a couple of guys can do it. What kind of this amalgamous thing, and then when by the end of the week, the clearer you can become, you
Yeah.
say, George, you're responsible to make sure this job is finished by 3 p.m. on Friday. Make it happen, right? And you get George on board with that. There's a higher probability George will have it done by then instead of some, crazy mixed, foggy destination.
Absolutely. And that comes back to if, let's say, we're delegating the task of collecting on or on invoices or money that's owed to the company. And if we tell our administrative assistant, hey, listen, collect as much as you can. Maybe
Yeah.
for them at 10,000, they feel satisfied because last week maybe it was nothing. But if the number is 80,000, they say, hey, that's a number that represents everything over 30 days. We need to collect on that. That's $80,000. I mean, that sets not only the goal, but the vision, but also if that person needs more help, we're able to provide more resources also. Sometimes you provide a goal and people look at us like, oh, I have no clue how to reach that goal. Give me more information. But if we're too vague, sometimes they'll try to hit whatever they can hit just based on their own knowledge or resources at the moment that we may or may not know that they have. And so I think that's where clarity becomes really important. And like you said, the clearer you can be, the more information it gives both sides. And then both sides can realize whether or not they have enough information to do what they have to do. So absolutely. When it comes to numbers, it's knowing how much money, something that's measurable, something that you can say, I've reached it or I haven't reached it yet. And then you can ask yourself the next question, how can I reach that goal? What do I need? What's missing? So absolutely.
Yeah. What is a discovery question? How is an action question, right? So first we discover, then we ask how we get there, right? And that's why with your 3 W's, you don't have the how, because we're not talking about action yet. We're trying to set up the frame, right? So what's super important throughout this, and you tell me if you've heard differently, Frank, but we want to make sure that we get the feedback from the person that's being delegated to, because there's a high probability, or at least a likelihood, that there may be some mental or physical block between where they are and where they need to be in that time frame, right? Maybe in their mind, to your example, maybe they have to collect $80,000 in that week, and then in their mind, they're scared out of their minds to go out and actually ask for that money, and they don't know how to do it, and they need guidance and leadership, but they won't ask for it because they don't know how to do that. They feel like they're going to be judged or something. So, how do you help customers that have or clients that have that kind of possibly even, money mindset issues that are holding them back when physically it's easy to do? It's just that they get stuck. Like, how do you help them?
Yeah. So that's great. And it kind of flows into my next point, because the first point is, like you said, you're gaining control. You're asking yourself the right questions to be able to do the actions that come with it. And I think once you figure out your priorities, who needs to do what, and like you said, sometimes you get stuck. The next thing you need to do is you have to create that environment, that space where people can have an exchange with you. If you're the person passing on the work and or delegating it, you also have to be able to provide a plan with that. Like you said, if the person looks at that number and looks like a big number, you should have a plan in mind on how to coach that person and to make sure you help that person first identify, hey, do you know how to get there? Do you need some assistance? That's the goal. Some people function very well that way. Some people is just give me the goal, give me the number, tell me what you need from me, and then let me go do it, right? But some people are on a different energy level, if I'll say, or personality style, where they'll be more passive and they want more information. They want to make sure that they don't mess up the first time because they see that as like a potential risk to them and the company. And so they kind of freeze up. And I've seen both scenarios. So I think it may sound simple, but alignment is created, in my opinion, by having those team meetings that are purposefully designed to get people to answer the most important question. Do you know what you need to hit as a goal? Do you know how to get there? And what can I do to assist you to get there? And I think when owners start asking those questions, people start being more open. And it kind of feels weird the first time, because I could count the amount of companies that were asking great questions, but they weren't asking those questions. They weren't asking, do you know what your goal is for today? They would say like, hey, do you understand what's on the plan? Yeah, for sure. All right, great. Have it finished by the end of the week, like you said. But if it's broken down even more and say, what are you going to do today? Do you know what you're going to do today? Do you know how to get that all done today? And starting to ask those questions more on the planning side. And that kind of is so important, but so missed when it comes to aligning sales with production. I see on a lot of occasions, the sale was done the right way, but the major flaw in the process is the handoff. And there's too many assumptions. There's too many, that's an experienced foreman or supervisor. They'll probably know. And it's like, I've realized when you have team meetings, even if you ask very experienced people and team leaders the same questions like, hey, do you know what the goal is? Do you know how to get there? Is there anything I can do for you? Even the most experienced people I've seen keep asking questions after those, just to say like, hey, I just realized this is great, but I just don't understand that part, or I'm missing some more information here, or you might have some information that I don't see, but I don't have enough to. So that's where there's not only a discovery phase when you start asking those questions, but there's also a realization that sometimes we assume a lot and we go based on those assumptions. So to get that out of the way and to align is to really have those purposeful meetings. Doesn't have to be a lot of questions, but to me, those questions are really what will align the team and the conversations and the job
absolutely,
sites.
dude. And as you're talking through that, I'm thinking like, it's exactly what I say in the, the core time sales playbook. Core number 1 is talk less and close more. So that's not just directly to your customers. At the end of the day, that is, as the leader, you're asking good questions and you're letting your team solve the problem. There's many times that teams come to me and they're like, well, I'm not sure what I should do next. And my first question is, well, what do you think you should do next? Hey, I'm going to jump in and just start saying, here's what you got to do every single time. And then once we get to the end of that, questioning like, hey, what do you think you should do? Well, I think I could try this. Okay, are there any other ways you could approach this? Well, and you get somebody else involved. How would you do that? And keep guiding. That's how you empower your team to start becoming more and more aware and giving them the opportunity to make great decisions. Because imagine how they feel inside when they're the ones that come up with the idea that you use as a company. It's not always dictated from top down, boss down. It is really trying to find that gold within the humans that you have working for you. And it's amazing when you start opening those doors in their hearts and their minds, they start to become problem solvers for you. They start thinking like you because you've given them space to do that. So it is very important to be good at asking questions. And in your mind, you might know exactly how to get there. You might know exactly how to do it. But you're not helping anybody by just telling them what they need to do. So once we get through that questioning pattern, right, the next thing you know at the end, you're like, okay, so George, we've agreed to this by this date, an exact date and time. Are you good with that? Yes, I got that. And if they were part of the genesis of that idea and that solution, how much more likely, listeners, do you think they are to follow through?
Oh, I've seen that this year. If I can give you an example, with a team that had been working together, employees there for over 10 years, the type of company that you have new people coming in, but experienced people within. And this year we said, we're going to ask different questions. The questions that we're going to ask you are going to tell us whether you need, because they're very independent people, but we realized there was a lot of gaps in the communication, even though you can have a lot of experience and still miss certain things if you don't have a system in place. And so we started asking at every meeting, because they don't want to have long meetings, but we still have to get to the point. So we would say, okay, what are you starting? What's at risk? Like, what's at risk of going wrong? Like, it could be delivery time. It could be the client not having approved something that could stall something else. And then the third question was, what's missing, right? So it could be, we have everything here, but we don't have materials on site. So if the team shows up, so we would discuss everything from just potential things that could go wrong, where we could even start planning now and say, okay, well, if that person has not signed the contract by tomorrow afternoon, let's send off an email to say that the job will be delayed, instead of just waiting for it and then the morning of changing everything for the crew. So just some quick examples, but the meetings don't have to be very long, but it does have to hit on those topics. Do you know what you have to do? Do you know what could potentially put some risk on that situation that goal? And then what are you missing, or what do you need? And that could be resources, it could be information, it could be a good handoff process. And when it comes to sale, there's so many little steps that I think when you're having a conversation with, whether it's your sales team, or it's so important to know exactly what have we done, what needs to be done, and what's missing in between. And sometimes we focus too much on the big goal without looking at, okay, well, let's break that down together so that everyone understands how to get there, right?
Yeah, it's true. And there's oftentimes we have these goals laid out ahead of us, but there's so many, let's just say, possible pitfalls along the way. And some
Oh,
people can focus on the negatives. They can find all the problem, the doom and gloom between here and the goal. They can just focus on the moats, if you will, as you're going down the trail. And
yeah.
they get stuck in those, right? And our objective is to see things as they are. If there are challenges coming, maybe it's a person, maybe it's a financial challenge, whatever it might be, but not worse than they are. Our
Yeah.
mind likes to create these fictional environments where everything burns down and the whole business fails and everybody quits and leaves and the clients don't pay you. Like, our minds do that naturally. So we have to be very careful and see things as they are, but no worse.
Yeah.
And if we can at least agree to that, then we can move forward and not let our minds take us into the worst possible scenario that's out there. So we have to be very cognizant of where our minds take us. And when you're setting up meetings with people, is to make sure you have people accountable to the goals at the end, have them involved in those conversations to make sure that there's buy-in from the team. Because if you're just dictating, you're going to be constantly trying to control people who don't, or possibly don't even agree with what you're saying.
Yeah.
And if they are, they're not going to put their best foot forward. But if they're part of the solution, if you're listening for their voices and you listen to them, the whole team does, pretty soon, what I've learned so much, Frank, is that I have a lot of blind spots. I don't like to admit it, and I'll admit it on air here because I know it's true, and we all do. We can't see everything. And when we admit that we have blind spots and we reach out and humble ourselves to our teams to help see those with us and be like, you know what, you're really good at this, but this part right here, dude, you kind of drop the ball a lot. Like, you're really good at selling, but you really not good at following through, or whatever it might be, right?
Yeah.
Let's get somebody to help support that so we can have a whole experience for the client. And perhaps it's not to your gifting, but we need to be aware of that and not be like, yeah, I've got it all figured out. I'm the boss here. This is how it works on my clock. And be more open to others helping out. Because when you do, you finally start building that team that you see others have and the ones that you dream of, where you can go away on vacation and they can take care of things because you taught them, you helped them develop their ability to think critically and solve problems like you would. Every day you do it. If you do it that way, then when you're gone, they continue to do it.
If there was one thing, if I had to break this down to one thing, and you've nailed so many good points there, but the best way to grow the most value out of an employee, a colleague, anyone who's working with you is that ability to share the information in a way that the person is also able to contribute to what they're bringing into the equation. And so, like you said, if it's a problem, helping them figure it out, but not giving them the answer every time, but making them go through the same process that someone who needs to do it would go through. So, for example, with some of the crews that we trained, and we were just doing a training last week, and we were telling the foremans and the lead hands, we were saying, listen, this year we're gonna tweak things a little bit. So when there's a problem on site, and we're gonna call it the 1-3-1 method. So when there's one problem on site, when you have those team huddles a couple times a day, usually in the morning and the afternoon, when you have those team huddles, start brainstorming solutions that you could bring. Like, you only want to bring one recommendation. That's going to be based on what you are thinking is the best. It could be based on what it's going to cost. It could be based on the time it's going to take. It could be just the best possible solution based on a multitude of information you might have or share together. But ultimately, what you're trying to do is, there's going to be problems every day, and start thinking about 3 possible solutions so that we can, when we have a serious conversation, we can decide really quick what the best one to recommend. You go through that exercise for 30, 60 days as a crew, every day, I can guarantee you'll be really good within 90 days to start solving problems. Or at least you'll have some really good recommendations because you're in that mode of problem, solution finding, and then recommendations. Just like any good company would do is it's a discussion. It's not only one person, right? So yeah, best skill, the most value you can get out of someone is to coach them through that process and for them to learn how to do it regularly and repetitively and to start being more consistent. Ultimately,
Not
best thing I think any team leader can do. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And so, when it comes down to culture and building that, a lot of this is it's culture focused, right? How do we act as an organism together, right? As a group, how do we act? And one of my rules that I have, and if the more you become conscious of your own, subconscious and conscious rules that you have in life, the ones that you want to integrate purposefully into the business, the ones you want to take out because they don't serve anything in the business or they just hurt. One of the rules is don't come to me with a problem unless you already have a solution. I don't want to hear belly aching about something. Right? I don't want to hear, oh, this is broken. I can't believe the stupid mailman always throws our mail all over the place. I can't believe this. I don't want to hear that. No, you have a problem. Come to me with what you think the best solution will be, and we'll talk about it. So always realigning a problem to, hey, let's find a solution. And having a team discussion at times for that and say, okay, well, what's the best way to get the mail in a nice concentrated space that is going to be dry and easy to get to and we'll solve this problem. And not just, and a lot of times I think owners, they want to be the one everyone goes to. They enjoy that ego bump, right? They're like, yeah, I'm the man, I'm the woman. Everybody comes to me. The problem is that you burn out. You're stressed out, you're burned out because every decision has to be run through you. I mean, I coach guys all the time, and this is one of the highest things that comes in, or one of those common things, like I'm burned out. Well, everything comes to you. You've never empowered your team to make decisions on their own. You're just like kids. If they always come to you to pack their lunch, to not tuck them in a bed, it's actually kind of cool. But, it's like, going through doing everything, tying their shoes for them, like doing everything for them, helping them, doing their math homework because you don't want to see them suffer. Like if you always do that, you're going to have someone that's dependent on you, not independent, right? So if that's true for kids, it's no different for employees at that point and team members. So it's like, okay, how can I empower them? This isn't about being lazy as an owner. This is about having others within their gifts that God's given them do things better than you can. And that's sometimes a big ding to the ego, right? It's like, oh my goodness, well, Sally can do this even better than me. I remember when Joseph jumped on board here at Master Plan and he came in for design, I wanted him to come in as a design support. Not as a designer so much, but come in and help me out because I was the designer. That was my identity. I was the designer. And when he came in and I saw him growing and like within 6 months or so, he's already like, holy crap, this guy's got some chops. Like this is going to be good. Right. And I'm thinking like, but what does that mean for me? Like what happens when he's going to leapfrog me pretty soon. Right. And he did. And it took me a little bit of time to manage that in my own head. I'm like, what is that? What is my role now? What do I do? I'm always been the designer. Now all of a sudden he's doing better than I can. And he has a lot more capacity than I ever did. And how do I shift that? How do I empower him and not try to knock him out at the knees so I can stay in charge? And that's really when you get to that point as an owner, when you start seeing others that are leapfrogging your capacities, you're either going to try to take control and knock them down so that you can stay in control, or you're going to trust. And this is what owners want. They want freedom, right? They got in business not so they could have more hours and more work. They got into business so they could be free and do what they want, when they want, whoever they want, wherever they want, as long as they want. This is the big dream. This is the step in that. It's empowering the team so that they don't need you anymore. But then the question is, what's your role? Yeah. What happens when you've been kind of pushed to the side because you have people around you that are far more capable than you? It's like you're either going to knock them down, like I said, or you're going to empower them. And then figuring out where you fit in that and what skills you now have to learn in order to lead a team like that. And that's really the whole progression that we all hope for, but it's the pain of letting go of who you think you are and identifying as something new, learning how to be a CEO or lead teams instead of just being that designer. That was a struggle for me. Because I'm like, all right, well, I know how to design, but to lead teams, I don't know about all that, Frank. Like, how am I going to learn those things? So then I started to study that and train and get mentors around that and just, made a lot of mistakes and continued to grow in that category. And I'm like, man, it's so much fun to see teams come together that are doing more than you ever thought was possible. And they're doing it for your company, and they're doing it on their own without all this push and constant. Because if you try to push a wet spaghetti noodle, it just bunches up, right? You can't get it. But if it's being pulled, you can do something with that. And if it's being pulled toward a mission, it's powerful.
I've seen people own businesses for 30 years and only discover that at the 30-year mark and say, if I would have felt that, because they never gave it a shot. They never gave it a chance. But now that they see how people are doing better, how more likely they are to be happy at work when they're able to feel like they have a say in things or they contribute in their own way and it's valued. And it changes the dynamic at work. It changes the culture. It changes the perception of them, of what is work, because it's not work if they're having fun and if they're able to solve problems and be part of the of what they're creating with you and not just helping you create something. They're creating it too. And so, I mean, your experience seems to be very much like mine. Once I found out that like these people are totally different when they're able to taste it, get a taste of like what it feels like to come at work and build things and then come and show you and say, hey, I've done this. And then you realize they've done it better than you could. It's a different mindset. We don't think it can happen oftentimes as business owners when we've never trusted or it's hard to let go. But definitely a huge point for sure. And then my last one, just to leave you, I think it's a big one just when it comes to money. I had a client who said, hey, we're killing it. We're doing so well this spring. We have so many contracts. And then I said, okay, well, let's take a few just to see how you're doing. And so we were looking at the revenue per crew and like how much they were doing every week. We had to dig a little bit for the information, but then we realized the jobs weren't as profitable as he thought they were. Like it seemed like there was because of all the money that was coming in, the leads, it's exciting. There's a lot of money moving in, moving out, but we're not as worried in the spring. We just see a lot of money, a lot of clients coming in. Sometimes being busy feels like we're profitable.
Oh, yeah.
But I would say this is where you can fix your major problems for the rest of the year is find out where you're losing money, whether it's in your quotes with the crews where they need to learn or maybe where you need to learn where it's the most or least profitable and sell more or less of that work until you can fix it. But definitely something to track is, so what we did with that team, we just established a small scorecard. We said, okay, well, you have to know your revenue every week, what you're producing. You have to know your gross profit on those jobs. So you have to track your COGS, so your cost on goods sold. So anything that has to be built to the job, you have to know about it and you have to track it. And then you have to know your pipeline, what's coming up, and just make sure you're tracking these 3 things in the spring, because I've seen people even just last year was a different year than the previous one and so on and so forth. But we're noticing sometimes there's some really busy times of the season, but then it goes very quiet. It's not like 2-3 years ago when we were in COVID and everyone was busy for the whole year. There's cycles, that's normal, but we see more of those cycles in and out. So having some projection and tracking that, we can take action a lot faster if we know what's going on. So I would
100%.
say that would touch on the third big one.
What you don't measure, you can improve, right? It's that simple. So if you're just, high on hopium, hoping it's all going to work out great, all that kind of stuff, that's wonderful, but it's only going to take you so far. If you don't have numbers to look at, you don't have certain goals set, and you know what, guys and gals listening, let's be honest, you're not going to hit them every time. But then you look and say, okay, I got to put some extra coal on this one, or you know what, this salesperson's killing it right now, or this production team is killing it, or this one's really slow. I wonder what's going on. Let's have a conversation. Let's not judge them. Let's ask what's going on. Do you need different tools? Do you need a better foreman? What do you need? More clarity? What do you need? Better direction? And let them help you solve your problem. The solution's there. It's just a matter of opening them up with good questions. And you mentioned something else in the beginning of this podcast, and you mentioned it again, this whole idea of busyness, right? And I was in this trap for so many years of my business journey that I thought the busier I was, the more I looked successful. And if I was the guy always all over the place, driving everywhere, doing stuff, I'm always busy, like you can't get time out of my schedule and all this kind of thing, that was a way to measure like a benchmark and just how successful in business I was, right? So how stressed can I be? Right? It's like, how much can I possibly take on the pressure of the world? Like, how busy could I be? Now, the question really is, for the listeners out there specifically, when it comes to busyness, do you equate that to success? The busier you are, the more successful you are? Because I call bullshit on that. I call big bullshit on busyness. Some of the most successful entrepreneurs I know are not busy. They are not busy. They have time. They're very purposeful with their time. Their schedule is very clean and consistent. There's gaps in it. There's times for all kinds of stuff. They have time because they don't equate busyness to success. They need production. They need efficiencies, all of that. That comes right back to why I wrote the book about tire kickers. There's a massive, massive gap in contractors' schedules when it comes to chasing people, spending hours with each one between driving and talking and coming back, preparing a proposal or design and driving back out or calling them, whatever it might be. All that time is pissed away week after week, month after month, year after year, and they claim it as some kind of badge of honor that it's like, look, I'm closing 3 out of 7 or out of 10. 70% of people are walking away, and that's something to be proud of. And I'm like, in what world does that make sense if efficiency and you actually care about making money and not just looking busy? I'm sorry, but that's not going to keep a business flush full of cash so you can go out there and serve the world. You can't do that if you're pissing your time away in places like that. So busyness does not equal success. We need to break that paradigm and get focused on the fact that productivity, efficiency, and how we can become more and more able in a quicker time frame to serve people. That is what we're solving for, not for more busyness.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think you start realizing that the more you are in business, how time can be taken away from you. And you talk about that every time I hear one of your conferences or your talks, and it's almost like, to make sure that you're serving the right way is to make sure that you're serving the right people and taking just a little bit more time in your process to make sure you're aligned with the people you're attracting for clients, your team. So it comes back to what we've talked about today, controlling your time, making sure that what you're doing with it is not something that is to make you feel better. Hey, if I run a lot all day and I do a lot of things all day, I feel good. That means it's probably going good. But the real truth comes in, are your team members aligned? Do they know where they're going? Because the multiplication number comes from your team. It's not from you. So you can work really, really hard. But hey, if you have a competent team that can work independently and come back with solutions or recommendations or help create at the same time, you're multiplying yourself by how many people you're teaching to do that. And so that's when you realize, a business owner, while we started out, we weren't productive or efficient in any way, but then we started to learn together and organize and structure a bit more and build some cadence and rhythms into our meetings and the information we share. And then all of a sudden we started noticing we work more in cohesion and we're more aligned. And then now I feel like we have a few gaps here and there, but we really understand how we work together and we trust each other and we have specific goals and we share information when it's needed and we have a place and a time for everything. And so when I hear that comes back to aligning the team. And then when the team's aligned, it means they know their numbers. Like you said, have something measurable, precise, that the team can go back to and say, hey, we've missed it, or hey, we hit it and we did a good job. And because it creates also a place to celebrate the wins. So the lack of goals creates the lack of, I guess, celebrating the wins also, which is a downer for a culture. But you can bring people up easily by just saying, hey, you hit that goal again. That's amazing. That's great. I mean, because and everyone's watching and you can be accountable to something if it's measurable. So definitely 3 things that can catch you off guard in the spring season if you're busy, but those would be my recommendations: controlling your time, aligning your team with your team, and tracking those specific numbers that can really organize your team and yourself in looking at where you need to be.
I love it, Frank. Well, Frank, anything else you want to share before we wrap up here?
No, I think I want to encourage everyone who's listening to keep listening, because I think you purposefully bring topics that makes us reflect on what are the next out throughout the year, right? And the spring season it's just another season. It goes by quick, but the more you prepare in the spring, the better you finish at the end. So it's like, for me, think of it like the more space you create to be efficient, and the more you think about what you need in order to be efficient, the more you're going to be able to produce and accomplish and reach as a goal throughout the year. I always tell people, learn from your mistakes early and you'll get much more results. And that's really what we're trying to do here with this podcast episode today, is really just reflecting on, hey, what's the 2 or 3 things, maybe just the one thing that I can do right now that's really costing me a lot of time or energy or money. And so I'll finish with that, but definitely a great time to have that reflection.
Yeah. It's
Thanks
so
for
much of
having
it
me.
is whether you're going to focus on being proactive or
Yeah.
reactive. The
Mm.
busier we become, the more reactive we are, because we don't have the time and the bandwidth to spend on thinking what 3 or 4, orders of effect might be. But so listeners, ask yourself the question, am I being proactive this spring or am I being reactive? And if the answer is reactive, we got some work to do. If it's proactive, we still got some work to do, right? The work never ends, but the first step of any time you set a goal is to understand where you are right now.
Yeah.
First thing we need to do is become aware, where are we right now? What do we know? What do we not know? And then work our direction. But is the world firing at us, or are we firing back out at the world? Like, what's going on here? Are we being proactive or are we being reactive? So Frank, I always enjoy, talking to you and your perspective. So if people are listening and thinking like, man, I'd love to talk more to Frank, how can they find you?
Yeah, frankbourque.com. So Frank, FrankBourque.com. And they can book an appointment right from the webpage. I'm always here to help anyone who's motivated to find a solution. So I'll always take 20 minutes to listen to someone who's serious, who's motivated, who wants to get that next tool, resource, or connection. I'm not always a solution, but having been in the industry for many years, sometimes it's just, the right connection to something else or someone else, or the right resource. And so thanks to your listeners for being here. And I welcome anyone who is looking for help or the next best action. I'm here if there's anyone interested. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, Frank, I appreciate you coming on here, and I wish you the very best. And listeners, we'll talk next week.